Okay, so today I'm going to be talking about the initial product discovery process, what it is, how to effectively plan for it, and two important frameworks and processes to use. Right. So in this, we'll go over what do we mean by product discovery, um, what are some good ways to keep a track of whether you're doing it well, and two kind of tools that I think are really useful throughout. So what is product discovery? Basically, you have some kind of use, like a startup consists of, any business consists of selling something and making something. Okay. And so what we're concerned in the product discovery process is the making of something. So let's assume you're either like a new startup, you could be like you could be consulting for one of your clients, and they may be have some new feature or new thing that they want to build, and it starts with some kind of problem that they have, right? So hopefully, like, if you've done the first part, then you've yeah. Okay, so um product discovery starts when you think someone has some kind of problem. Okay, and then there are two things you need to do. One is to you need to do two things. You need to build the thing, and then you need to sell the thing. And so today we're going to be talking about building the thing and not so much selling the thing. And before you can build the thing, you need to figure out, and for both of these things, you actually need to figure out more about the problem and kind of what it is. Without having a good understanding of that, you'll neither be able to build an effective solution or sell it to people. And so let's talk about jobs to be done first, and then let's talk about user story mapping second. Okay. So jobs to be done is a framework. It was, there's some book about it, and there was basically like a really famous Harvard Business Review article that I can link to you. And it basically invites you to think about the product as being hired to do some kind of job for some person. So the job, the reason this is important is because it helps you think about, this is that classic whatever, like if Ford had asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. And the way that this kind of applies to that is, and jobs to be done helps you both sell and build the thing, and we'll talk about that also. But when you meet the customer and you ask them what it is that they need done, they're going to give you some kind of answer. But that answer could potentially be, superficial. So, oh, what do you need? I need a faster horse. But actually what you want to do is try and understand at a deeper level what the user needs and wants there, what they're feeling, and just more about what is the context in which this kind of solution is being sought, right? And so basically asking yourself what job does the user want done helps you discover the deeper underlying need that they have in that scenario. So one example is, we'll watch this Mad Men clip, which talks about jobs to be done too, and where, we could do that now, or I can give you some examples. I was working with this. What's a good example of a job to be done? Yeah, like Calm or Headspace. The job to be done there is for you to feel better in some way, right? It's not to teach you some kind of breathing technique. It's not for you to learn a guided meditation. It's for you to feel calmer or something like that, or have more headspace, right? So that's a good indication that they thought about what the job to be done was there. Let me go look at my notes. Maybe that'll jog something. I did write a bunch of stuff about this, but clearly not translating into a talk. Jobs to be done help you understand your users better and get a more nuanced user persona, because the same person may have different jobs to be done at different times. Think about the difference between using an Uber to get to an interview versus with your friends after a night out. You have very different needs and concerns at those two times. So basically, jobs to be done helps you dig underneath the thing that the user is saying they need to what the basic problem is, allowing you to be much more creative in the way that you explore the solution space that we'll come to when we talk about user story mapping. What they really need to hone in on is the progress that the customer is trying to make in a given circumstance. What is what the customer hopes to accomplish? Yeah. So basically, the user has some kind of job that they need done, and they're doing somewhere right now. And your job is to make them change their behavior and use the product that you have in order to do their job. And so understanding what that job is really well is really important for you to do that. Start with the why, says Simon Sinek, and the why is where the jobs to be done takes us. Like, why is that user looking for a product? Why are they here? What is the broader context of their life? That's maybe a bit too broad. How are they feeling when they're looking for a solution? What are their hopes and dreams? And then so basically, like, jobs to be done and how to use that concretely is a good question, right? Or some real life examples. So we can watch this Mad Men thing. It's a bit long, but we could potentially watch that. You're a product manager at some consulting company, okay? And they've tasked you to maybe build a new feature or a new product. And so jobs to be done forces you to examine. It'll basically, like, you're trying to understand, you have some kind of hypothesis about the users trying to do something, and it's the way they're doing it now is not good enough. And the reason you're building a product is because you think that once you build your product, people will actually use that to do the thing that they're doing instead of the way they're doing it now. Classic example. All right. This is actually from, okay, this is from this other talk, but I can talk about it. And then I'll give you an example from my life as well, maybe, and that might take a second longer. But there was this dude, and he had these clients, and they were like, oh, they built some kind of fancy reporting system. Okay, here, I'll give you the same story from my life. I was working for this, with this company in the payment space, in the fintech space. And one of the executives was asking for like a new report to be written every week. And so I had one engineer who was just working the whole time to write these reports. And they kept coming, and we would write these really bespoke reports for him. And at some point, it seemed like this was not a very good use of time. And so, so I went and asked, like, I was like, oh, why do you need these reports? What do you use them for? What's the audience? Just trying to understand kind of what you're trying to do, so I can make that whole process easier and better, and maybe try to we can just do it all at once, rather than having to do this ad hoc on a weekly basis, and you having to wait then another week to get kind of the data that you need. And it basically turned out that those were internal reports. They were required for some kind of reporting purpose in internal meetings, and this person didn't know how to use Excel. And they had just been in a really senior capacity earlier, and then they had come to the startup, and they just didn't know how to run the report. And so their standard was just to ask like someone on their team to run the report for them, and so that's what they were doing. But the engineer, rather than just like running the report, also didn't know how to use Excel. So then they would just like write the report in like SQL and make it like a part of our platform, which is a really bad use of time, right? But once I had this deeper understanding, okay, this person has a, like a monthly meeting for which they need these numbers. Now I have a much wider kind of scope in which to provide a solution, which in that case turned it out to be just like send me, like just tell me whatever reports you want and I'll just run them for you. And then I just wrote macros and did that, right? Much better solution than frustration on the part of the executive because he wasn't getting reports on time, and on the engineer's part because he's constantly writing these reports, which didn't seem like a very good use of his time. Another kind of very generic example, especially in consumer facing products, is when the user first comes to your page and you provide them options on what to do, right? And so here there's a case study on Calm about this, and I can show this to you, where basically they had initially framed the things, and I don't know if they've changed it now, but yeah, they've changed like, oh, what do you want to do, rather than, do you want solution A, solution B, solution C? But the user doesn't care about solution A, B, or C. What they care about is, I have this issue right now. Can you help me solve this issue? So just reframing it in terms of what is the job to be done, and understanding from user what outcome they're looking for will, help you a lot. And so just a more formal way of saying, or like a formal framework to continuously ask why someone is doing something, what their deeper needs and motivation and context are. And it's basically like, if someone comes to you and you're like, oh, I want to do a talk, like, in this example, it's like, why? Okay. And so that'll help you kind of dig deeper. And if you really understand the job to be done, you really understand why the user is doing this. And so the way this will play out in real life is when you're doing your user interviews, or when someone's asking you to build a feature, for you to consciously dig at, oh, what is the user actually trying to do here? And I think one limitation of user personas is that they talk about who the user is, rather than what they're trying to do. Because again, like in that Uber example, my demographic and location doesn't change, but what I want from an Uber to go to an interview at 9 a.m. is very different from what I want from an Uber coming home from work or coming home from a party, right? So being sensitive to those things, and not being constrained by, like, or realizing that the same user could be using a platform for several different things. And essentially and also what it allows you to do is, and it feeds into user story mapping, the last step in your product should be the user getting that job accomplished that they had come to your platform for. And so it helps you kind of write the end of the user story flow as well. And so that's jobs to be done. And now let's look at Mad Men, because I've been talking for a while. And okay, so user story mapping. I first came across user story mapping when we were working on like a financial product, and the business was going from something like, low 4-figure transactions to 6-figure transactions in a very short amount of time. And the compliance engine had been built piecemeal, and the job that we had to do was given like some amount of time that we had before go live. We had to solve to the best of our ability the bottlenecks in the kind of compliance and onboarding process, right? And so there was no documentation on what happened end to end. And so the first time I came across user story mapping was in this context, or and so what I had was like, just like, okay, where does the story start? The story starts with some user coming on the platform, and the story ends with the user making some kind of payment, and then potentially making payments over many years or something like that, right? What is that story? Like, tell me step by step. And so one context in which, so yeah, user story maps are useful in many different contexts. One context to be to understand end to end what's happening in a specific product. And so that's a really good tool to use when you're going in on a new engagement and trying to understand what the product really does. Many times I'll ask clients and they'll throw like, either like, oh, we don't have a spec, or yeah, we just build this product like, randomly, and there's no central document that I can go read about it. Or they'll give me old documentation, or they'll give me like 1,000 documents that I then have to go and pass through, which is not very good. And so, yeah, in one context that it can be useful is like, just tell me exactly what happens to the product. And so, an example is Uber. Uber is a complex. What's a really simple example? like let's talk about you going to the Apple store and buying something. Okay. So you go in and then, you know, someone meets you and they talk to you and then they call someone else, or maybe that's not a good example. It's a good example. What's a simple product? Steady state product already exists. Yeah. So like, let's talk about LinkedIn, right? So you go in, you kind of, your first step is you have some kind of profile creation, then you add some kind of people, you know, then you kind of use the timeline and all these other features you can use. And so the way you can stitch it together in a, that's not good. Okay, let's talk about why. It's really simple. You go online, you do some onboarding, add a contact, you link a bank account, you know, you add, you connect the bank account through whatever, Flinks or Plaid, and then you add a contact, then you see the fee, and then you pay them, and then the payment goes through, and then you get some kind of receipt, right? That's basic flow, let's say wise. So let's say you didn't know this. Now you can go and ask, you know, the story starts with a user comes onto your platform and ends with the job to be done. If you're just looking at the user flow, and if you're thinking about marketing or something, it can be the user refers other people or something like that. Or, you know, if you're thinking about growth, it can be the user comes back and uses your product again. So that's the start and the end. And then user story mapping is a really efficient way to figure out what is it that it comes at every step. So in the context of discovering about an existing product, go and ask someone in that company, or you know, someone like, okay, the user comes on board, then what happens? And then tell me that, and then write it. And I can show you, all my user story maps are lost. I can show you a user story map. And yeah, and so this was the client, and I'll just gray out the text. So, you know, we're not, or whatever, I'll modify it. And so it's like, oh, he had all these steps. And this is like, you know, how the user goes through that platform the first time. And it just gives you like a really good kind of overview of what's happening in the platform. You can then go and add screenshots and options. You can just like get a really good kind of thing. And then in new products and in improving old products, what you want to do is you have a job to be done happening at the end. Like, then you can figure out, okay, what is all the steps that a user has to go through in order to get this critical job? What is their critical path to get to the job to be done? And then you can start thinking about, like, if you want to make this job easier, or, you know, it's taking you too long to like do this, or there's something not right about the flow. Now you can look at each step and figure out where is drop off happening. It allows you to do analytics and kind of group structures. You can have a discovery phase, you can have like a, you know, decision phase, you can have like a payment phase, you can have like a checkout and whatever post delivery phase. And so you can then think about the different phases in which people are interacting with the product. User story maps can also be really good when someone wants you to build something and you just have them describe to you in great detail what that thing is. And actually, user story maps are one of the first steps in the whole product discovery thing, because if you look at that design book, one of the first things to figure out where in that, when you're trying to build a product, like in some sense, the job of a PM is to kind of identify and tackle the biggest risks first, right? And so in order to get a good overview of what is all that's going on in the product, if you have a user story map, then you can figure out where the biggest risks are. And then product discovery is essentially about going and solving the highest risks first, and then doing it, you know, testing it and then iterating on that. And so the user story map is almost the first step. It's like a map of your product, right? And it shows you, because it's a user story map and it focuses on the users, it'll make sure that you don't start building like random features, or that you build features only in line with what the job to be done for the user is, and that you always keep that job to be done front and center, or like the very kind of crux of why you're building the product. And so everything that you build, as long as you have it in the context of a user story map, you will know where it fits in, which job it affects, and then from the job also implies which problem it's solving for the user. And so you'll never, the chance of you going and building something that's completely like irrelevant to the user becomes a little bit less, though it'll still happen. User story mapping, yeah. So you can use story mapping both in problem and in problem space and solution space. And so on a meta level, what you're trying to do is the user does something now, like this is how they do some kind of thing now, and this is how like I have this kind of solution, and when I superimpose it on top, like this will be more efficient, right? And so even in terms of using, like it's basically like a flow diagram. So even in using the user, also people are better at telling stories and less likely to miss out steps when you ask them stories, as opposed to if you ask them to explain the whole thing, they'll send you a document. But people are a lot better at talking than they are at writing. And so just like ask them to tell you a story, that's a structure they can understand, and you're likely to get like a more complete picture that way. Right, so problem and solution story map. So problem story map, how are users doing it today? Something like, how do I heat my food today? Oh, I go, open my fridge, take out the food, put it in a plastic, in a glass jar, whatever, and then put in the microwave, and that's it. Or like whatever, whatever. That's a little cultural, the special one. Yeah, basically you can use it to understand how people are doing stuff today, because you're like, like really common kind of thing is like, tell me about the last time you had this problem, to understand really what the user does. And the good thing also about user story maps is it like write them as people are doing them. And maybe we can do an example now, right? Like you, whatever, the first person on the list, tell me how do you like, how you bake a cake or something, right? And now I'll show you, and then if we miss stuff, then actually it gives you like, oh no, there's something about how the best way to get people to engage is to like tell them something wrong, because people want to correct other people a lot more than maybe they want to be helpful or something like that. So if you write the wrong thing on the thing, it'll be really good, because they'll catch you. So you can use it in the context of understanding how it is that they're functioning now. And then when you try to imagine your more perfect solution, it also forces you to think about what every step is. And telling a story in this way provides a lot more context than any one screen could. And so now you have the story, and then you can actually add your mocks and your things. And now because the story has been told, the purpose of user stories is not to create right requirements. It's to create a common understanding of what it is the user is going through. And this is that lovely image, and I'll show you that image of the triangles and the things. So actually writing it out, saying it, drawing it, makes a huge difference in terms of, if you've ever had engineers come back and build something you absolutely didn't want, expect the way that in a way that was completely unexpected, even though it lined up with the mocks and the written documents. This is the problem, right? You have tried to convey a story without telling it, without talking about it, just by writing it, and people read words and interpret them differently. But when you talk about a story and you go back and forth about it, it forces you to kind of clarify the transitions and changes, and everything is seen in the broader context of how the user is going to use it and the value that it's hoping to provide, rather than, oh, this is some piece that's in isolation of everything else. And so without the context of what's happening before and after, sometimes it can go awry. So that's why user story maps are also super useful. There's a really good book, there's a really good video about it. I think it's a fantastic learning resource. It helps with prioritization. It helps you make sure that things that you are building are actually relevant. It helps you create kind of a shared understanding of what it is that you're hoping to build along with your engineers and your designers and your stakeholders. And it's just a lot more specific. So yeah, whatever. You want to edit stuff you don't want to have like high fidelity mocks, and you want to change flows as soon as you can. And so actually making changes to a user story map is so much easier and quicker than going to mocks, where the abstraction, like you're forcing people at that level to do the abstraction and then tell you what they think on the abstract level. So just keeping it abstract in the beginning will like just take a user story map and just show it to everyone, and then it'll be so much quicker to get everybody kind of on the same page or something about what it is that you're trying to build. So those are the two things. You can apply user story maps and these two tools to anything. The reason that I spoke to these two is, one will help you kind of go back to the user's kind of underlying needs and motives, and user story maps will help you plot the chart from where they are, which is this need part, to the solution that they're looking for. And so these two together, like you can apply them in any kind of product thing. They're both super lightweight, and infinitely applicable. And that's why I really like them as tools. I think they're both really foundational. And I applied it to the stock, and I can show you how I applied it to the stock. This also, we didn't talk about sell in this talk, but it actually does apply to sell as well. there's that great thing from first round, and I'll show you that one. If you can, basically the way you can sell it well is to understand how people think of it in their head. If you can mirror that language, people are not coming to you looking for like features. People are coming to you with some kind of hopes, fears, anxieties, feelings, right? Excitement. And for you to be able to mirror that in your copy will be really, really powerful. And for that, you have to have a good understanding of what the job to be done is, and consequently, what are the things that have frustrated them and annoyed them about other things that aren't working well for them. And so that'll make your value proposition a lot clearer. And now, please, let's watch Mad Men because I'm tired of talking. Yeah, here are some follow-up materials. Yeah. So basically, yeah, I know we didn't do a lot of like, and maybe if there's time now, we can talk about how to like specifically apply these things. Just so we can give a really good thing. So I'll pick one of you and ask like, what's the last time you bought something? Okay, and this person says, I bought a kettle. Okay, why did you buy the kettle? I wanted something to basically drink hot water because the boiling whatever was. So you were looking for someone to provide you like hot but drinkable water. Yeah, and so then I guess why, like, what is it that you need that for? Like you can just use the 5 whys here. Like why do you want hot water? Oh, after my meals, whatever, like I don't like drinking cold water and things like that. Okay, like it's a very simple use case, it's not that deep. But now what you could do is, if this is the user that you decide you want to help for, then you can include specific marketing about, uh, is and also like I wanted something versatile, and then I didn't want to take it with me, so I wanted something that other people could also use. And so now you can like really understand what it is that this user was looking for. They were looking for something that was versatile, that did less than boiling water, held it for long periods of time, did it quickly. And so now if you say like, you don't even have to change your product, but if your product does these things, you can just highlight it to this kind of user, and that'll yield a much better response rate, right? So that's an example of how you can just ask, try to understand what the job to be done is there. And user story mapping, if you're designing the kettle, right? Now you're like, oh, it should have like maybe the user comes in, opens the package, puts out the kettle, maybe rinses it, doesn't rinse it. Ideally, if they don't rinse it, I don't like rinsing it. Pours in water, press some buttons, and then the result at the end is, oh, they get hot water that's drinkable in a short period of time, right? And that's one flow. Then another job to be done could be, oh, it works well for other people or whatever, like something like that. So some kind of talk through about how you can use these in a practical way. Okay, that sounded pretty good. I think that's good.